Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest, Gordo Byrn. Welcome, Gordo.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Great to have you. So maybe we start. You could maybe give a short introduction who you are and your story.
Sure. So my background is probably what I'm best known for is winning a race called Ultraman Hawaii, which is a 3-day triathlon on the big island of Hawaii. And it's a 10-kilometer point-to-point open water swim, followed by 2 bike stages over 2 days. And then the last day is a double marathon. And it was a great event for me. Now, in addition to my own racing, Ironman distance, 70.3 distance, I have coached many athletes and written a book about Ironman training. And the athletes that I coached were not necessarily elite athletes. I tended to work more with elite amateur athletes,
Hmm.
people trying to qualify for amateur world championships. And I worked male and female athletes, primarily in the age range of 30 to 70 years old. So
Hmm.
I have a really wide range of experience working with high level athletes, but not elite athletes. So people that were, and most of these athletes were not elite athletes when they were younger. So they are
Hmm.
people that came to sport later in life and after they were successful in their careers and they were looking for a new challenge. And for many of them, the Ironman in Hawaii was their focus to try and qualify for the world championships in their age group, get there and really experience what it's like to race that event, a very special event in Hawaii. So I think it probably gives you a good feel. Now, in addition to my time in triathlon, I've experience with ultra running, long distance mountain biking, mountaineering, and some other ski mountaineering. So a pretty broad range of endurance and ultra endurance events and sports.
Hmm. Sounds very interesting. And was it a conscious choice that you went with the elite amateurs and not with the elite for the triathlon and other sports?
Well, at the beginning, people just started asking me to coach them. So I've always written a lot about my own training. And people came to me and they asked for help with their program. And they were people, they amateurs. And I was like, sure. I mean, and I started down that road. But ultimately, what happened is my background was in finance, in private equity investing. And so I was a peer to many of my athletes in that I had a similar area that I was working
Hmm.
in and I understood their industry, what their life structure was like. And I think that was part of attracting them. And then from a business point of view, I mean, it's just, a doctor or a dentist or somebody that's a professional actually has money to pay for a coach. I mean, many elite athletes don't, actually, most sports, most endurance sports, the elite athletes don't have much money at all.
Hmm.
And so so it's difficult to build a business. So I think most coaching businesses, particularly in the triathlon space, are focused on amateurs, and that's driven by market forces.
Hmm. And you said that you have had athletes between age range of 30 to 70 years old. So I think it could be interesting to discuss that how do you need to train and recover when you are over 40, over 50, over 60, maybe even over 70. That how does it change? And you probably training quite a bit now yourself, so you have also your own experiences and from the coaching. How would you start this discussion?
Okay. So the I think so there's a couple distinct phases, I think, in the changing physiology of our bodies. And at, I think, around 45 for men and women. And it's approximate. And the changes don't happen suddenly. The changes happen gradually in
Mm.
midlife. But really, with my own training as an elite, when I was at my absolute best, I was in my late 30s. And by best, it was best both in terms of performance, but it was also best in terms of my capacity to train. The two are
Mm,
linked together. So the capacity to train will result in the performance. And then the many years stacked on top of each other increase the depth of fitness.
mm,
So so as I transitioned into my 40s, my capacity to train declined a little bit,
mm,
but it was my ability to do the key workouts. So the important workouts, similar to what I would do as an elite, was still there. So what I
mm,
did was I just dropped out some of the total load, but I was
mm,
still able to do very high quality workouts. So my performance in that 40 to 45 range was still at a very high level.
mm,
Also, because of the many, I mean, over 10,000 training hours in my 30s, that has
mm,
a very powerful effect going forward on the physiology, on my physiology. But around 45, I noticed a clear shift. And I don't know if it's a hormonal shift or really it's like a whole body shift. The way your body deals with stress. And and in terms of stress, the stress an elite endurance athlete gives themselves is a very high level stress. It's a very concentrated form of stress. So
mm,
it became clear to me that I just couldn't train at those prior levels. Now, females seem to tolerate the stress better. So this point in a female athlete seems to happen a bit later because I've seen friends of mine in Boulder that are still able to train at quite a high level all the way up to 50 years old. And some of them, exceptional women, can even in their early 50s. But for the men, there's a clear shift at 45. And if you're looking at it, you look at it, say, in 5-year increments. So there's a big difference. So 38 to 43, not
mm,
much of a change. You'd say there was a little change. But if I look at 40 to 45, there's a clear change. And then from 45 to 50, wow, another clear change. But year to year, things are changing gradually. So as we get on the far side of 45, so we've noticed this change happening in our body. The most important thing that I tell athletes is you need to be very careful with putting yourself in a hole. And what I mean by that is when you're a young athlete and you're in your 20s and 30s, you can make a choice to really put yourself in a very deep fatigue state. Now, it might not be optimal, but if you happen to do that and with a stage race or even what we used to call stage training, where it's a mixture of short race type efforts and high volume, you'll come out of that hole pretty quickly. And you'll be able to go down and come up and go down and come up. Now, after 45, you're not going to be coming back up. So you have to be much more attuned to your fatigue state because if you put yourself in a deep fatigue position, it could take several weeks to come out of it. And in
mm,
that case, you're having to give away so much training and so much load that you end up kind of behind. You're not gaining anything from this big training. So that's a shift in focus. I think the focus needs to be much more subtle with the training approach. The other change that I think athletes should consider making is also you're going to need to cycle your training load much more across the year. And what
mhm,
I mean by that is with a young athlete, you can actually train them at quite a high level most of the year. And that would be up to, I mean, in my best years, I was training seriously 10 out of 12 months of the year.
mm,
If you try to do that with a master's athlete, you'll find that they go stale. And what I mean by stale is even if the metrics look good, even if the feeling's good, the body appears to be okay, the training's going okay, uh, I call it like their mojo, the mood, they'll just kind of go flat and the enjoyment comes out of the training and it becomes like work. And so what I find is more effective with the masters athlete, the older athlete, is most of the year is about a base level of volume, a comfortable level of volume. It's about staying healthy, staying strong, and then focus periods to prepare for a specific event. And so what it means is across the entire year, the overall amount of hours invested is coming down. So it's less total work, but the idea is closer to the event, you'll try and get more work to get the performance at the event. So there's much more of a cycle in terms of the loading across the year for that athlete. And that also fits with the rest of their life better. And related to that, we're coming out of winter. And I think it's very important for a masters athlete not to go too hard in the winter because you don't want to get to this time of year, March, April, when nature is coming up and your body is naturally coming up. And you've already spent so much mental energy in January and February that you can't take advantage of this natural lift. So that's another aspect that I would say. And then the type of training, let's go into that because I think
Yeah.
the type of training after 45 is also very important. So if we read books and we listen to the media, there's a tremendous focus on VO2 max and VO2 max declining with age. And I also think people talk about a high VO2 max being good for longevity. And I think it can mislead many athletes. And what I mean by that is, as an endurance athlete, if you try and optimize your VO2 max, you're not necessarily going to be optimizing your performance or your health. And what are the components of health that are particularly important? And now I'm thinking really 60 plus. So I'm thinking
Mm.
about later in life. The components are metabolic health. They're very different components than VO2 max. By metabolic health, I mean it's the health of our mitochondria. It's the ability of our body to do work, but to do work at moderate intensities. And I think this is something that many masters athletes, particularly ones that were fast when they were younger, lose sight of. I feel like it's something I lost sight of in my own training as I got older. So there's a focus on velocity, there's a focus on VO2 max, and as a result, they get out of touch with their mitochondrial health, this low end health. Because as I mentioned earlier, I'm getting older. I see I need to drop some volume. So I start dropping my easy volume. And I end up with a week that is a lot of tempo and a lot of threshold type training, a lot of higher intensity training. And it costs me with my metabolic health. And I think that's an important aspect of overall health for the long term for people to think about. The other thing is, in order to do work, we need muscle. And it sounds obvious, but if we look at how athletes live, and if we look at many people are weight conscious and as opposed to being performance conscious, and they're running these energy deficits every year around their race time, and slowly, gram by gram, they lose the lean body mass a little bit each year. And then after 45, it gets much tougher to maintain lean body mass. And we arrive late in life and we've lost this lean body mass. And as a result, I think some of our decline in our top end performance is due to this decline in lean body mass. So with my athletes, with small athletes, female athletes, and older athletes, and if somebody is 2 or 3 of those, so if you're a small female older athlete, it's even more important. With those athletes, I am a big believer in year-round strength training. So that doesn't mean that strength training is the number one focus, but it means we're never getting out of touch with strength training. And by that, particularly compound exercises on the lower body. So stimulating the legs, in a way that's different than the stimulus that they'll get doing endurance sport. And then the final piece would be agility. And triathletes are really good at going forward, but they don't get much practice moving laterally or jumping off of stuff. I think that's why I like skiing, skimo and mogul skiing, because it's a very different stimulus. It doesn't do much for your cardiovascular system, but if we think about healthy aging and successful aging, the ability to ski is really about balance. It's about rapidly changing in different directions. And I think it's very relevant to successful aging. And so keeping an element of agility in the program is really thinking about long-term health. It might not do much for you this season, but in terms of 10 or 15 years later, your ability to stay injury-free and not crash your bike when you get a little wobbly is really helpful, I think.
Mm.
And so those three components, I think, are important for the aging athlete.
Yeah, a lot of great points. Maybe I ask next about the strength training year round. How do you program it? I personally, for example, find it difficult that right away when you start lifting weights with your legs, every other training gets difficult, whether it's skill training, whether it's endurance training, legs are just feeling so heavy. So how do you do the strength training and still be able to feel good doing the other trainings?
Okay, so you are absolutely correct there. It's so when someone so it depends on the background. When someone starts, if they've never done leg weights, it's like when a cyclist starts running too. All of a sudden the sprint just disappears on them and they're like it's gone. I have no sprint and it can be somewhat depressing for them. So I like to first off, you need to start very gently, very easily, like embarrassingly light weights and high reps. And you're really just getting the body used to it. Because if you don't, you're right. You really won't be able to do anything. I mean, I can think back to sessions where I overdid it and even walking up a flight of stairs was too much for me. And so what I say is start very, very light, and once you get yourself to the point that you have this tolerance of strength training, it actually takes very little to maintain it. So you need to build the tolerance, and the best time to build the tolerance is the winter. You build it in the winter, and we used to focus working with athletes. I say, well, what is the worst month you have for outdoor training? And for most people, it's going to be, say, February or January.
Mhm.
And I would say, okay, well, we are going to do a strength block in that month
Mm.
because it's something that you can get done and it's not going to cost much. And then if you think about the 2 months before that block, that strength block, you need to be preparing the body so that you can actually do the work in that block. So the whole strength focus is going to be 3 or 4 months, but in terms of the period where you're actually tired, it's going to end up being 4 or 6 weeks. And
Mm.
within the 4 or 6 weeks, you're probably looking at only 10 sessions with an endurance athlete. But those 10 sessions are going to make that athlete tired, and the quality of the endurance work is going to go down. But we're going to accept that because we know 5, 10 years from now, there's going to be a payoff from it. And actually, for many athletes that haven't strength trained before, they'll notice that the following season is actually quite a good season. I think if you haven't strength trained before as an amateur athlete, it can really help your cycling, particularly your time trialing. If you transition the gym strength to bike strength. So there needs to be a strategy afterwards where we're going to take this leg strength that we built up in a non-specific way, and we're going to transition it in a specific way to the athlete. And the common method there would be big gear training, low cadence training, training where we're trying to generate a lot of torque and force using the specific joint angles and the specific bike position where we want to perform.
Mm.
So for triathletes, that's that time trial position. Get strong in the time trial position. Don't just get strong on a leg press machine. And
Mhm.
then as we move out into the competitive season, it goes to maintenance. and it's light, but it is being done every week. And so when we end the competitive season, we can get back into the strength training, but we're coming back into it from a higher level. And then we're not starting from scratch again, and we don't get the
Mm,
same level of soreness. And then the
mhm,
years build on each other.
mhm,
And the idea as well is it depends on the athlete, but certainly every 5 years after 40, I recommend that an athlete tries to get very strong one winter. And by very strong, I would mean as strong as anyone else in their category. So it would be relevant relative to your category. So
mm,
female 55 to 60 type.
mm,
Okay, I want to be for a 58-year-old female, I want to be as strong as anyone in my category. And I'm going to
mm,
try and do that every 4 or 5 years. That's something I've done in my own training, and I feel like it's helped me stay healthy and keep that lean body mass on.
mhm,
A lot of times we say we can't, you'll hear people tell you you can't gain lean body mass after 40. My experience is that's incorrect. You just you need to be energy positive, and you need to do the right training, and you can make these gains. But it needs to be a focused block. And that's going to be it's not 4 to 6 weeks, and it's not just 10 sessions. It's going to be more of a season, a 13-week focus one winter, when
mm,
you're thinking either your life means that you can't do the endurance training. So for me, that was in the pandemic.
mm,
The COVID pandemic, I was like, well, what can I do? Well, I guess I could get really strong. And so
mhm,
for that year, it was very much a strength focus for me. And I missed the metabolic health from the endurance training, but it just wasn't practical. Here in the US, we were locked down for a period of time. I mean, they didn't even want us going outside and stuff. And I had a
mm.
home gym, so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to get really strong.
No, it really makes sense, and it's nice to hear from a endurance athlete and an endurance coach to talk about strength training like this. I think it's not often like this.